She thought for a little while and said, "I still can't accept it. If our collaboration proves to be successful, I might be able to give your company a bonus. Unfortunately, until that time, the risks are too great. So I'm afraid I can't accept this." Prescott was getting impatient. According to the information he had received, Natalia had previously only been a sales manager. She had been taken advantage of by a person called Brett Andrews, who had bought the company and let her manage it. Logically speaking, she should have been impatient to sign the contract after seeing the information on Prescott's company. "Miss Laplace, you have to consider this carefully. If you work with Riedling, you can make a fortune. If you miss this chance, you'll regret it." "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. I know that you're eager, but I have my own considerations as well. I hope we have a chance to renegotiate a partnership at another time." Natalia smiled as she stretched out her right hand. Prescott rolled his eyes, stood up, and shook hands with her. He held onto her hand and gave a sinister smile as he said, "Miss Laplace, don't think that I don't know how you got your position. I don't blame you for cheating on your worthless husband. Why don't you form a partnership with me? I'll be much better than Mr. Andrews." Natalia was so angry that her face turned red. She withdrew her hand and said, "Mr. Carter, please be careful with what you're saying." He said, "Why are you pretending to be so aloof in front of me? I can offer you more than Mr. Andrews, in every way. I'll give you one more chance to work with me. Or maybe you'd prefer to visit me tonight." The assistant couldn't bear to listen any longer and shouted, "Hey, scumbag! If you're trying to hit on Miss Laplace, then you're wasting your time." The other representatives of the company also cursed Prescott. They were the trusted aides of Frazier and Brett, so they felt happy to humiliate him. The verbal attack dumbfounded Prescott. Finally, he laughed and said, "Very good, gentlemen. It's easy for you to stand there and insult me like this, but I wonder if after I've taken over your company, you'll still have the guts to talk to me like that." The assistants were quiet as they exchanged uneasy glances with each other. If Riedling had the power to take over Natalia's company, then the company would be done for. "Why aren't you saying anything?" Prescott asked with a malicious grin. "Cat got your tongues?" He laughed, and the men sitting on his side of the table laughed with him. "You're despicable," Natalia said. "You came here under false pretenses. There's no way they would go so far as to buy the company, is there?" she thought worriedly. "To the victor goes the spoils," Prescott said. "All's fair in love and war, and whatever other platitudes you think would fit the situation. After all, everyone knows that you're the CEO only because of the people you know, not because you actually deserve it." "That's right," one of the men sneered. "It doesn't matter if this company goes down. You just have to whisper sweet nothings into Brett Andrews' ear, and he'll get you another company to run tomorrow." "Cut the crap," Natalia said. "You came here to make a deal that would benefit both of us, so let's deal." "But that's not what I'm after anymore," Prescott replied. "It's more interesting this way." Natalia's lips tightened. "I don't have any way to fight back," she thought. "This company is my life. But if it's taken out from under me, how on earth would I explain that to Brett? How would I explain it to Frazier?" "You seem to have trouble making up your mind," Prescott said. "I guess I'll have to choose for you." He turned to his assistant. "Buy it." "Yes, sir." The assistant left the room. Natalia's eyes widened. I can't believe the company's going to be destroyed on my watch." "Mr. Carter," she said desperately, "I'm sure we can come to some agreement." "Miss Laplace, I'll be honest with you, Prescott said. I've only been talking to you for this long because you're pretty. But since you're not my woman, I find that I've lost all patience with this conversation. I'm done talking. Natalia slumped in her seat. This situation is hopeless, she thought. The assistant rushed back into the room and whispered something into Prescott's ear. What? He thumped the table and stood up, shocked. He couldn't have looked more surprised if his assistant had told him the sky was falling. Let's talk outside. He grabbed the assistant's arm, dragging him rudely out of the conference room, and yanked open the door of the room across the hall, where several employees were eating lunch. Get out, he said in a tone that brooked no argument. When the room had cleared, Prescott turned to his assistant and asked, Someone else is outbidding me? Who would do such a thing? If I find out it is one of my associates, I'm going to make fish food out of them. Shh, the assistant said. I don't know who's doing it, but it's true. No matter how much we pay, the other party offers $10,000 more. Prescott thumped the wall. Someone's playing with us, he growled. $10,000 is nothing. They're clearly trying to humiliate us. Offer more. How much more, sir? I don't care. However much it takes. There has to be a limit to what someone else is willing to pay for this company. He shoved his assistant to the side. Get out of my way, and I'll take care of this myself. He pulled out his phone and dialed the broker. If I can't buy the company with $20 million, I'll buy it with $30 million, he said. His broker called back a short time later. Another party's bidding $30 million and $10,000. Prescott kicked the trash can beside him. It tipped over, spilling a half-full cup of soda onto his shoe. Keep adding, he said. $50 million. Another party has bid $50 million and $10,000. Then bid $80 million. Another party has bid $80 million and $10,000. Bid $100 million. Another party has bid $100 million and $10,000. Prescott threw his phone at the wall and stood there, breathing heavily. He clenched his jaw and retrieved his phone. Forget it, he told the broker. I'm done. Across the hall, Natalia was still anxiously waiting for Prescott to return. 5 minutes turned into 10 minutes, which then turned into half an hour, and he remained absent. She listened to the clock tick. Each second was torture. At one point, she had her assistant call Brett to see what was happening. He had no news of importance. An unhappy client had made a complaint, which had been readily dealt with. Natalia felt like she would be sick. What do we do, Gina? She asked her assistant. Don't worry, Miss Laplace. Her assistant reassured her. I'm sure it will all be fine. Several hours later, near the end of the working day, they finally received a phone call. Gina took the message, hung up the phone, and smiled at Natalia. The company hasn't been sold, she said. Maybe Riedling was just playing a nasty joke on us. Natalia heaved a sigh of relief. She was utterly exhausted from the tension of the day. Corporate warfare is more draining than fighting an actual battle, she thought. Come on, she said. Let's all head home. Frazier was waiting for her at the front entrance. He was sitting in the white sports coupe and he waved when he saw her. What are you doing here? She asked. Brett said you were here, so I came to pick you up, he said. You haven't given Henry back his car yet? Oh, this isn't Henry's car, he said with a shrug. This car belongs to the company. It's just the same model. Brett's letting me drive it. Frazier had played against Prescott all afternoon to prevent his company from being acquired by Riedling. I came straight here from work, he thought. Hopefully, she will buy my excuse about the car. Natalia stepped up and slapped Frazier across the cheek. What was that for? He exclaimed. Brett. she said with tears in her eyes. Everything is Brett's. Do you know how hard I've had to fight to make a name for myself in this company? No, of course you don't. You don't know anything. You're completely worthless. He wasn't here for me when Prescott was saying such cruel things, she thought. She turned away from Frazier and his car, hailed a taxi, and went home alone. Frazier knew what had happened that day, and he knew Prescott's personality. He didn't have to think too hard to figure out why she was upset. I have to use Brett as a cover for my identity, he thought. But it makes it difficult to talk to Natalia. I'm sure Prescott told her that she only got the position because of Brett. She was already feeling insecure because of what James told her last night, and Prescott's words today would have doubled that insecurity. Public opinion's not always pleasant to powerful businesswomen. He called Brett and told him to send someone to fetch the car, and then he called for a taxi. I can't drive this car home, he thought. I don't want to trigger her any further. Dorothy was waiting for him, and she cursed at him as he came through the front door. Do you know what time it is? She asked. Why on earth were you this late getting home? Where have you been? And what about poor Natalia? When she got home, she ran straight up to her room and shut the door, and she hasn't come out since. If I find out you've done something to hurt her, you're out of this house again. Dorothy was not afraid of her son-in-law anymore. He's completely useless, she thought. Anyone with any dignity would fight back after being scolded like that, but he just sits there meekly and takes it. What cowardly trash! Frazier ignored her. Natalia was his only concern. He quietly pushed the bedroom door open to see Natalia lying on the bed. Her cheeks were damp with tears, and she appeared to have cried herself to sleep. He sat down on the edge of the bed, gently rubbed her back, and started humming a lullaby. Then, he noticed she was taking short, sharp breaths instead of the long, deep breaths that indicated sleep, and fresh tears leaked from the corners of her closed eyes. He got up and quickly left the room. As soon as he was gone, Natalia opened her eyes. She had been sleeping, but Dorothy's loud voice had woken her. The poison in my dreams was Frazier, she realized, and the lullaby was the same. The following day, Frazier finished cooking breakfast and was just about to wake Natalia when she walked into the kitchen. He was stunned to see she was smiling and had her hair pinned back with a jeweled barrette. But what surprised him the most was that she was humming a little melody that sounded suspiciously like a lullaby, like the lullaby he had hummed to her the night before. Shouldn't she be angry this morning? He wondered. Did she lose her memory of what happened yesterday? She saw him watching her. What are you looking at? She asked, but her tone was more playful than offensive. You never called me down for supper last night. I figured I'd help you with your diet, Frazier muttered. What? Are you calling me fat? Again, he noticed that her words didn't have their usual heat. Then again, you are a good cook. But don't forget who's taken care of you for the past 3 years. 3 years that I did all the cooking, he mumbled. Who took care of whom? What was that? She bantered back. You'll have to speak up. I didn't hear you. Breakfast passed pleasantly, and Frazier realized he hadn't been this happy in a long time. Even when James bumped into him again, he just politely smiled back. After Natalia left and Frazier went to work, he realized that the pleasant interlude was over. Frazier was surprised to learn that the corporate games that they had played the day before apparently weren't finished. We didn't find anything, Brett said. Hugh is too crafty. He seemed to know that we were looking into him. He slipped out of our grasp 3 times now. He pounded on the table in annoyance. It's not your fault, Frazier said. After all, we're not the only ones looking for him. No one else has succeeded either. Frazier hadn't been expecting the investigation to bear much fruit. "What's Prescott's status?" he asked. "It seems he's afraid of you. After he failed yesterday, he holed up in the East Side slums and is laying low for the time being." "I'm not surprised. Hugh was counting on him to break the Robster Corporation by taking Frandotech, and he didn't keep up his end of the deal. If he shows his face now, Hugh's going to make an example of him. Prescott could quite literally pay an arm and a leg." Frazier tapped the table, thinking, maybe we can use this to our advantage. While Frazier and Brett were considering the situation, Ryan called. "Boss, Prescott is on the move," he reported. "He's got himself a boat ticket out of the city, and he's on his way to the docks right now." "Well, that's unexpected," Frazier replied. "The slums should have been safe for Prescott," he thought. "There's no shortage of abandoned houses and derelict buildings to hide in there. If he's trying to get out of town, someone's backed him into a corner." Hugh must have made his move. "Ryan, gather the men. We can't let Prescott leave. This could be dangerous. Keep your eyes open. I'll meet you there." He got in his car and drove toward the docks. The dock district was both a tourist destination and a busy shipping port. It was crowded with people. Frazier parked several blocks away and found Ryan as he walked into the district. "The ship's moored on the eastern side and is due to leave in half an hour," Ryan told him. "Yeah, but when you're panicked and trying to skip town, every second feels like an eternity, especially in a crowd like this." "There are a lot of eyes out here," Frazier replied. "Prescott's clever. He snuck into the plaza, but before we could catch him, he'd given us the slip." The two of them found themselves jostled by the crowd, and they made their way to a quieter spot by a wall, where Ryan wiped the sweat from his forehead. "We could always just wait for him at the ship," he said. Frazier was thinking hard. "It's not reasonable to try to find one person in this sea of people," he thought. "And Prescott's good at guerrilla warfare. He knows he's got people after him, and he's going to be extra cautious. However..." "Ryan, get the men together," he said. "Have them check the east end and make some noise. The bigger the commotion, the better. You and I will go to the west end." Ryan was confused. Does he know that Prescott is in the east? Is that why he's sending the men there? He thought. And if so, why are we going west? Who else are we after? He knew better than to question his boss. He called the men and had them pass the word. "All of you, head to the east end and search the crowd. Make sure you check everybody that passes through that side. Don't let him slip away." The men rallied. "The boss sure is fast," one said. "As expected," another replied. "We've been searching for hours with no luck. The boss just arrived and he already knows where to look." "Get a move on. The boss is watching," Ryan ordered. All of the heaven breakers filtered toward the east end of the docks. Once there, they thoroughly checked everyone who was coming and going. Their actions caught the attention of another group of people who were also searching the crowd. "Ryan's men have found Prescott on the east side," one of them said into a walkie-talkie. "Let's go," came the reply. "We can't let Prescott fall into Ryan's hands, or the boss is going to be upset. And if Hugh's upset, things won't go well for us. Hurry!" Several other gang members headed toward the east end. While the east end devolved into chaos as the crowd was caught between the two gangs, Frazier stood on a high platform near the west entrance and watched the people below him like a hawk. Suddenly, his gaze locked onto a man wearing a windbreaker and a black felt hat. He was moving quickly, darting from cover to cover. "Ryan," Frazier said. "There's a man in a black coat and a hat at 5 o'clock, heading east." With Frazier's direction, Ryan found his target. Prescott had watched the men looking at him move to the east end. He had hung back, waiting until they had all moved and hoping to get lost in the chaos. He hadn't realized that Frazier had faked him out and used the rival gang's men to his advantage. Ryan slipped through the crowd, caught up to Prescott, and grabbed his shoulder. Prescott whirled around. "Ryan!" he exclaimed. "You won't be able to escape," Ryan said. He snagged Prescott's collar and pushed him over the edge of the walkway. Prescott squirmed in protest. "If you let me go now, I'll give you 10 million, Prescott said. "Besides, what do you think will happen if you catch me now? Do you really think you can deal with the heat from Hugh Styles?" "I think you stand a better chance with us than you do with Hugh," Ryan replied. "I have to get on that ship and away from San Clemente," Prescott thought desperately. "Well, don't say I didn't warn you. Don't blame me for what happens," he said. He suddenly stopped struggling and pulled a dagger out of his pocket. Ryan saw the sunlight glint off the blade's edge, but he was too close to avoid it. "Go to hell," Prescott said, as he tried to stab Ryan's abdomen. Frazier appeared suddenly on Prescott's other side. He grabbed the dagger with one hand and karate-chopped Prescott's wrist with the other, breaking Prescott's grip. The dagger clattered to the ground. Prescott stepped back, so stunned that he didn't seize the brief opportunity to run. "I've seen a lot of fighters in San Clemente," he thought, "and none are that fast or that accurate. Even Hugh, who is in peak fighting condition, couldn't do that." He watched in a daze as Frazier stood up straight. Small drops of blood fell from Frazier's fingertips, but he didn't seem to notice. "Take him away," he said. Prescott blinked and snapped out of his stupor. "Where are you taking me?" he asked. "Listen, I have money. I can pay you off. How does 10 million each sound?" "Cut the crap," Ryan said. "All the money in the world isn't going to do you or us any good if Hugh's men find you. Now move." As they stepped away, one of the tourists saw the bloody knife on the ground and screamed. Ryan grabbed Prescott's elbow firmly, and they started walking quickly. They had a limited time frame to blend into the crowd. The scream had attracted attention. People began to cluster in the area, gawking. Prescott was done struggling. He knew that Hugh's men would be there soon, so he kept moving with Frazier in front of him and Ryan beside him. Ryan called the Heaven Breakers, who were still on the east end, and told them to fall back. They were confused. They had the east end locked down, and they felt it would only be a matter of time until they found Prescott. Yet they did as he commanded. Once they reached the car, Ryan shoved Prescott into the rear and slid into the driver's seat. Frazier hopped into the passenger side, took out a first aid kit, and started dressing the wound on his hand. "Prescott," he said, "we can get you somewhere safe and keep you alive. Did you really think you'd be safe aboard the boat?" Prescott remained silent. "Of course. I wouldn't be safe on the boat," he thought. "Hugh's got informants everywhere. He might have even paid off the captain. But what other choice did I have? There's a slim chance I could have gotten out of town before Hugh found out. I thought that if I hid in my cabin, I might have had a chance of survival." "And you think I'd be safer with you?" he asked. "It seems like you're just using me as a pawn to get at Hugh. This is jumping from the frying pan into the fire."
Hey guys, Frazier here. Listen to the full episode of Unraveling the Son-In-Law exclusively on Pocket FM app. Click the link in description to install the app now.